Nicole has been a grant maker for more than 13 years, working in state government. She's currently the acting leader of the grants team at Heritage New South Wales within the New South Wales Department of Premier and Cabinet. And I believe she's also in the middle of a very busy grant round. So I'm really appreciative of her taking some time out for this conference and particularly for this session. The Heritage New South Wales Grants Program is designed to provide a wide range of support for customers and to respect the cultural safety of Aboriginal customers and staff. In 2019, Nicole and her colleagues in the Heritage New South Wales Grants team were awarded the title of Grantmaker of the Year. That's a competition that we run in recognition of a range of ideas and innovations. I'll be talking with Nicole today. We're going to do a bit of a Q&A session about her experiences as a grant maker and what insights she can offer about competing for the Grantmaker of the Year title. So welcome, Nicole. Hopefully, yes, I can see you on the screen there.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me here. It's been such an exciting day so far, and I'm really excited to be here with this guy, which was the Grantmaker of the Year award in 2019. That's our little superhero, super cat that sits in the office.
Fantastic. I'm great to see that it made it to you without the ears coming off. That was one thing we were worried about in the transmission. So, Nicole, can we start by having you tell us just a little bit about the grant making that you do through Heritage New South Wales, so we can just set the scene for the people listening about what sort of granting you do.
Absolutely. We have in Heritage New South Wales, the program's been running for 40 years, so it's quite a historical program. But my team's been doing it for the last maybe 5 or so years in different capacities. And at the moment, we've got 3 main categories. So that would be caring for Aboriginal cultural heritage and helping people to celebrate and understand that particular type of heritage. Caring for state heritage, which is items on the State Heritage Register, and also community engagement and community heritage. So that's sort of where we're sitting at, and we have about $3 million per annum, and it's a team of 3 people. So quite small dollars in some sense, but with heritage, everything seems to be very bespoke. Everything is very unique, so it's a very interesting grant program to be part of.
So one thing I've learned about grant making over the years is that the size of the budget really doesn't have any bearing on how busy you are, how difficult the granting is. Those things just seem to scale no matter what part of the spectrum you're at. I was one of the people who was lucky enough to be on the judging panel for the Grantmaker of the Year Awards when you won, and your application kind of popped off the page for a number of reasons. Many people talk about the art and craft of grant making, but your application actually made it clear that the mechanics of grant making are just as important. So you talked about strategy, risk, communications, financial management, good governance. Can you tell us why you called those things out in your application?
Absolutely. When people ask me, what do you do for a living and what's your job like? And I say I'm a grant maker, they think we're just giving out money, just standing there with a pot of gold, splashing it around. And that's really not the case at all. The way I explain it to people are we're responsible for the investment of funds. And my grant making experience is with state government. So that's public funds. And that's a responsibility that we take very, very seriously. We're all taxpayers, so this is public money that's being invested back into the community. And that's sort of why I think, and my team thinks, that the mechanics are so important. It's because we have to be accountable for the investment of public expenditure. And that's sort of where we build our grant programs around and our processes around.
So there were some echoes of that in what Gavin said earlier as well about just getting the structures right before you can start being creative and things.
Absolutely.
One of the things that I've personally noticed over the years, I always love to ask grant makers at this conference, and I'm sorry I don't have many of you here in person today, but I always love to ask people during networking and over drinks, how did you become a grant maker? Because what I've found is that, as Dennis mentioned earlier, there's no course that you do to make you become a grant maker. People come from all different paths into the world of grants. Is that true of your team? Do you all come from different places? And what's the sort of secret sauce that makes it work?
Absolutely. I didn't set out to be a grant maker, you know, I didn't even know it was a career. I'm actually an environmental scientist, so that's my background. How I got into grant making though was I'd worked in private consulting and realised that a lot of people were moving into government roles out of the consulting industry. And what drew me to it was the role that grantmakers play in supporting positive and proactive projects, as opposed to perhaps fixing an environmental problem that was already there. So that drew me in and got my attention. And I've been doing this for about 13 years now in lots of different grant programs. At the moment with Heritage, my team is quite diverse. So we're a very small team. We're a team of 3, sometimes 4, at different peak periods, and we've got lots of different backgrounds. So working with contracts, working with refugees, working with businesses and different industries. At the moment, we have an acting opportunity, so I'm acting team leader in my group, and that's a wonderful opportunity. It makes me appreciate my boss's role much more, but it also means that we have a lady on secondment from the Rural Fire Service grant. So it's wonderful to keep those different pots mixing together and learning from each other as we go. The one thing I think that makes our team work really well, and the special sources you mentioned, Kathy, was the strong sense of community service and being the custodians of public investment. So with our Aboriginal cultural grants, you know, we talk a lot in our Caring for State Heritage grants about ownership of heritage items, but in our Aboriginal cultural grants, we talk about having custodianship of those items rather than ownership. And I think my team sees themselves as custodians of this investment and of these outcomes. I'm very passionate about that. And we also have a lot of trust and respect and confidence within the team too. It kind of makes me think of a rowboat, you know, when you've got the whole rowing team rowing together, everyone's doing their one little bit and they know what their strengths are and they focus on that, and it just comes together beautifully as a team. So that's a wonderful, wonderful experience that I've had with grant making, and how people sort of fall into it by chance, but then find that it's such a rewarding career to be in.
I absolutely love that notion of custodianship of the funds, and I
Yeah.
think there's some really troublesome power relationships that can form in grant making, and if the grant makers stop seeing that money as their pot and more as the custodians to get it to the right place, I think that could help break down some of those power relationships. Nicole, the Grantmaker of the Year application form, and the new one does as well, but when you entered, asks applicants to put forward 3 big ideas about grant making. And I think one thing I've noticed when I have grant makers in the room, they all have ideas. This is an opportunity to get them down on paper. Can you talk us through the first idea that you put forward? And I'll just call that out. You talked about creation of a place within Smarty Grants to help lead grant seekers through project planning.
Yeah, absolutely. And where we came about this idea as a team, and I keep saying as a team because we applied as a team and we work as a team. So I'm just the voice of the team today, but we found that many first-time applicants, you know, the people who have found out about the program and think they've got an idea that will work and really want to have a go, they seem to focus on 1 or 2 key areas about what they wanted to do, but they overlook other really important aspects of the grant application itself, which are things like risks, risk management, even identifying what potential risk might be, how they're going to disseminate their outcomes and their successes. And I say successes in a way that even if something doesn't quite work out the way you think, it can still be a successful outcome, and you can still learn a lot from that. And even going back down, I know it's a state government thing, but looking at procurement and how that's going to happen. And sometimes that can be the difference between whether an application is successful or not and gets funding or not, is some of those little minutiae. So we thought about, you know, and all our experience coming together, which is over about 55 years of grant making experience, you know, basic project planning principles, which anyone can learn, anyone from any background, any skill set can learn some basic project management principles. And that's what we use to build our application forms, is project management. So we sort of see it as we're asking people to convince us to invest in them and their project. So we need to see that they've planned it well. And by say planning it well, I'm not referring to it has to be beautifully written or even grammatically correct. I just want to see that you've thought about it all properly and thought about everything that may or may not happen with that. So when you look at the mechanics that we talked about before coming into fruition, people putting their ideas out of their head onto paper or onto a forum and sharing it with others and working together could be a really great way to capture those ideas, have them in one place, and a planning portal online in Smarty Grants would be perfect for that, because then people could collaborate, they could get ideas out when they're thinking of them rather than when the grant programs are open. And they could be under sort of fields like, you know, what, why, when, how, who, these really basic concepts. And those fields could relate to sections in the application form. So when the application round does open, they're able to populate, oh yeah, this is my who question for this round, and I'd like to apply to that. And if they're trying to seek funding, you know, it's very competitive at the moment to get funding. So perhaps they want to do the same application to different grant programs to increase their chances. They can disseminate those, you know, answers that they've already planned and thought of back then off a forum or a portal, and put that into, you know, their Smarty Grants application form, which they're already using. So we'd love to see something like that happen. In the meantime, you know, we've put on our website, on Heritage New South Wales Grants website, these sort of project planning principles, and we can share them through networks like LinkedIn and social media. But it'd be really great to see some of those community groups out there in particular who are quite dispersed and have very limited time to put applications together, having a space to store those ideas and work off that when it comes to the application time.
So this is one of those times where I come clean and say that one of the clear purposes of the Grantmaker of the Year Award is that we get to pick your brains and get all these ideas that we can then feed into what we're doing. So I don't want to preempt anything, but watch this space over the next 12 months or so. There may be something similar coming soon. I can't say any more, or I will be disappeared or something. Okay, so another idea that you had was the introduction of a notice board or a message board, again on the Smarty Grants site. I love that you reference Smarty Grants because we are keeping on building and making that more and more useful. How would you see that working?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, like I said, I've worked in different grant programs and there are different platforms out there, but Smarty Grants is a very commonly used one. And so I've noticed even when I started using it for the first time, a lot of my existing grantees were already on it, which is fantastic. So I think in terms of the notice board message type of field, we were realizing that people are suffering from email overload. Certainly, I shudder to think of how many emails are coming through my inbox today while I'm at this conference, but it's just the nature of the world these days. So we thought that having an online place that people could go to at their own convenience, which was specifically tailored to grant recipients, those who had already started their projects, would be a wonderful opportunity to put information targeted and tailored to their needs. And so that could be things like templates, forms that they need to fill in, any policy updates that might affect their grants, or legislative updates that might affect their project deliveries, funding about other programs that we become aware of from our partners, to say, hey, have you heard about this opportunity? And they could maybe choose to be prompted of when they look at it. They might choose to look at it once a month. They might choose to set notification, alert me when there's a new template. And, you know, target things a little bit more than what we can do on a general website, where we've kind of limited to how much specific information we can put on there for the general public. And that's sort of the idea that came behind that one. Any sly hints as to whether we might get something like that soon?
Later than the other one, I think, but all of these ideas, I think Dennis mentioned earlier that there's, you know, something like 1,000 ideas sitting in the backlog, and they occur to not only us, but the users sort of day after day. But every now and then I hear someone like that one through your application. I think, now that's a really great idea. So yeah, no hints on that one. Just returning to your application again, one of the things that really stood out to me from your application was in relation to your Aboriginal cultural heritage grants. So you talked about in your application that you'd done a review and that the review had found that you needed to engage better with your Aboriginal communities. So you listed 3 things on your application that you did in response. So they were really practical, and I thought a lot of people will be able to gain a lot from hearing about them today. If you could talk us through those.
Absolutely. The first one we did was create a champion team. So rather than just have a generic, for information, contact this phone number or this email and you'll speak to a grants person, instead we decided to have a team of men and women from around the state, and that's both Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal people. We published their photos, their contact details, their cultural affiliations, because that can be really important for our stakeholders, and also their areas of skills, knowledge and expertise. So when a grant round opened, if they needed to find out about, for example, Aboriginal heritage impact permits, they'll be able to look at that list of people and know exactly who they'll be able to talk to about it. If they need to talk to somebody about a women's site, then they would have a choice of who they could actually talk to. So it was a much more personal approach. We looked at cultural safety, not only of our applicants, but also our staff members, because that's really important. Even just giving somebody a choice of who they can talk to. And that really helped us overcome a lot of barriers. Secondly, we commissioned an artwork, and I've got it right here actually. So we commissioned an artwork that we published from a well-respected artist, Bronwyn Bancroft, and it's called Living History, and it comes with a statement that speaks to the objectives of our grant program. And the purpose for doing this was that we wanted to communicate without using words. So when I look at that artwork, I see certain, I can see images that I can recognise and identify what it means and assume some sort of meaning from that. But when I speak with my Aboriginal colleagues, they see something entirely different. So it's speaking to the stakeholder in a way that they will connect with and not using words. And it's also about celebrating culture. The fact that we could engage and commission an artist to do this work for us is a real celebration and something that we're really proud of. The third thing we did, and I think this is actually the most important one, is we worked with our colleagues who are Aboriginal to help understand about this culture and things like just appropriate wording and terminology. So I will say that at Heritage New South Wales, we have about 30% Aboriginal identified staff, which is fantastic. And building those relationships means that we can learn a lot if we take the time to ask questions and listen and learn from that. So there is a difference between knowing about something and understanding it. And this is why I say this is the most important thing, because it can be a simple term, like we hear the term Indigenous all the time. But to many people, that's actually a very offensive term because it refers to flora and fauna and not people. But for other people, they can be completely fine with it. But it's just knowing and understanding that it could be offensive to some, and so perhaps we should use a different word. And so that's why I use the word Aboriginal now. We also gain this perspective where I said before, I'm a state government employee. And I always saw myself as, this is public funds, I'm doing a public service. What I've learnt through truth telling and through working with my colleagues and hearing their stories is that there is a different perspective of what government might mean to some people. And that could be things like stolen generation, and government can be a very scary thing. And that's something that really shook me. I didn't think of it in that way before. And I thought to myself, oh my goodness, I thought that was something that happened a really long time ago, not quite as connected to the present day, but now I have a better understanding about what happened, when it happened, how there could be intergenerational trauma from these sorts of things. And so that gives me the empathy that's needed to do my job properly and to engage with my stakeholders properly. So that, to me, was one of the most important things that we did, hands down.
Fantastic. we're going to touch on that a bit more in the next session as well, some of those things that we can do to better engage with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities. I just also wanted to make a comment that innovation is so often used as a shorthand word for tech and apps. You know, you apply for an innovation grant and you go up to the top of the list if you're building an app. To me, what you're talking about is true innovation. You know, just giving someone a choice of who to talk to. That's innovation to me. That actually helps us solve the problems that we've got. And just building a chatbot or something like that wouldn't have helped with that. This conference is all about looking back to see how far we've come and casting forward to see about the future of grant making. And we've been getting some comments through the chat about that along the way. I'm wondering, Nicole, if you could reflect on your years as a grant maker, what you would say has been the most significant shift that you've seen in the industry, and whether it's been good or bad, or maybe you can give us a variety, however you want to take it.
Look. My experiences in state government, I haven't had the opportunity to experience grant making in other fields. I think when I first started, you know, we were advertising in newspapers and maybe on a website. Now, social media, everyone's connected after COVID. My grandmother is video conferencing with her European relatives in their 90s. You know, that is something that I would never think would have happened. So I think communications is really opening up a lot. I also think it's really important, you know, to recognise the skill set that grant making is. It's such a technical area that not a lot of people understand, and so I think that reflects as well with the grant applicants. You know, they think, oh, I can just put in this application form, but realising a bit more, and it's becoming a bit more apparent, you know, how much planning there could be, how much monitoring and evaluation is really a built-in part of grant programs, and budget certainly should be budgeted for if it isn't, and resourced. And yeah, I think, you know, innovations, like you say, you know, this year we included some language in our guidelines for the first time. Those sorts of things are really important to happen, and they don't need to be complex or complicated things. So I'd love to see what other people are doing in this area.
Great. I've got another question here that's come in from the chat. At what point can you stretch your organisation to try new things, and to what extent do you need to really focus on the basics? So I think there's kind of two bits to that question. Yeah, I'll let you take that.
Yeah, great question. I think a lot comes down to how receptive you know, the people who make those decisions are, and how much of an influencer you can be. So with myself, my team leader, Jan Nye, is so wonderfully open to ideas and trying things and hearing you out. So that goes so far in just having someone who's open to listening to things. It also helped that we had an evaluation done. So we had solid data sets to base that off and to justify why we were doing something. You know, we said we needed the evaluation found that we needed to improve our engagement. We tried these three things. Our application numbers went up from 5 to 30 to 45. So, you know, data is so important. And I really enjoyed the sessions this morning about that. So I think it's a combination of the two, being convincing, telling people why you want to do something, but having the evidence to back it up. And yeah, just backing yourself too. Like the champion team idea just popped into my head one day. I was like, why don't we do this? Totally random. Back yourself, give it a go, see what happens.
Give it a go. I think that's something we need more of. Take a risk, give it a go. Someone told me years ago when I was going to do something risky, it's not jail, indicating that you can just reverse it if it doesn't work. And that's kind of set me free for the rest of my life, I have to say. I think about that all the time. It's not jail. Look, I've got one more question for you. What do you think grant making will be like 50 years from now? I know that's kind of a bit of a weird question, and it's impossible to know really, but you've thought a lot about grant making. Where do you see it going?
Who knows? Who knows? It's changed so much in the last, you know, 10 years, and that's a lot of technology changes. grants are getting more complicated and sophisticated and more complex, certainly seeing that. And just from the people and the conversation I've seen at this forum today, you know, everyone's at different levels, everyone's stakeholders are at different levels. It'd be wonderful if there were more forums like this, particularly in Australia and New Zealand, where we could all come together and build on each other's skills, but that same drive and passion for the same outcomes. It'd be fantastic if we could build on that. And I really love the innovation ideas. So I'm super excited that Smarty Grants is offering the Grantmaker of the Year award again. I want to see these innovation ideas and be at a conference in 20 years' time going, I was there and then that person said, let's try this out. And gosh, how much have we changed now? So Matthew Schultz, I'm going to hold you to that article about video applications and video reporting. I'm so keen to see how people do that. I'd love to know more.
That's fantastic. I said that was going to be my last question, but I'm going to ask you one small one more. Just if you've got any advice for people who might want to enter the competition next time.
Absolutely. Just go with your gut instinct. You know, what are you doing already? What are you thinking about already? There are so many times where I see my grantees apply for awards and win awards at, you know, industry events. This is the only one that we have in Australia, and I think New Zealand, I'm not quite sure. There's certainly not many Grantmaker awards or recognition schemes worldwide. And again, when I show off this little trophy right here, I say to people, look, it's like winning a gold Logie, and instantly they get what I'm referring to. They say, you've had peer recognition for your work, and that's the wonderful thing. You know, you can't know how much peer recognition for ideas and thoughts can be really appreciated, and how that can boost Grantmakers' confidence. So definitely apply for the award, apply as a team, you know, apply as a part team, apply as a division, apply with your support of your grantees. You know, they thank you for doing the hard work that you do. Use that feedback to build your application.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Nicole. That's been really great to hear your ideas and your enthusiasm. And thanks also to you and the team for actually putting that application in, because it can be hard to put yourself out there. You're often in your own little cloistered area and you don't know if everyone else is going to dig your ideas. We absolutely did. So thank you very much for entering the awards, and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to hearing the next speakers.
See you soon. So now it's over to the rest of you. We say, one of the sayings we say is that good grants don't make themselves, they need good grant makers. So if that's you, and I'm sure it is because you're at this conference, and you could use $5,000, no strings attached, we don't even ask for an acquittal, here's your time to shine. So applications are open now for Grantmaker of the Year. Here's what you need to do. So show us that you're a problem solver, an innovator, that you ooze grant-making smarts and creativity, and you could be in the running to be named Grantmaker of the Year 2022. The application form is not hard to fill in. It's a lot easier than most of your forms. I've seen a lot of them, they're terrible. This is an easy one. If you know grant making and you have ideas to share, you'll be in with a good shot at winning. Plus, we're giving you, I'm not joking, nearly a full year to get the applications in. That's not to say that you should wait a year before entering. If you've got ideas, get them in now. We do have a few small eligibility requirements. You must use Smarty Grants to administer your grants. You must have been a grant maker in some form or another for 6 months. And you must submit your application before the 21st of February 2022. As I said, don't leave it until then. Get it in as early as you can so that you can make sure you get in before the closing date.